Welcome to Uncharted. I'm your host, Captain Kelly, and with me today is Orianna Schneps. Like, where do I start with this woman? She's worked as yacht crew, she's a below deck celebrity, and now she's just launched her own agency, Moby Media. So exciting. And she's done all of this in 30 years. I have no idea how. This girl's a machine, a powerhouse. And now Orianna is going to share a bit about how I'm sure was what an uncharted path to where she is today. So welcome.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you for having me. I love the name of your podcast. I think it's so applicable. I definitely have had a bit of an uncharted past, to say the least. Very kind of like all over the place, but it's gotten me to where I am now. So.
Oh, that's so exciting. Well, tell us, we need a little bit of background for those of us that don't know you, like where you're from, what you did before yachting and now, and then we're going to dive into all of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So hi, thanks for having me again. I'm from Cambridge, Massachusetts, so up north, very cold, very different compared to Florida. But I got my kind of introduction to yachting when I was in high school working at the New England Aquarium up there. I was like a penguin feeder. So I would go into the tank and feed the penguins from my hand, their little fish. And I also worked in the dive tank there and their medical center. And when we were on one of the research expeditions to the Bahamas, it was like a dive trip to kind of do surveying. I learned about yachting. And then when I graduated college, I was like, this sounds like a really fun career. So kind of instead of going into pharma and biotech, which was my original plan, I packed up one suitcase, headed down to Fort Lauderdale and applied for my first job.
Oh my God. But you know what? That's a really cool high school gig. Who gets to say that you're involved in research projects and you get to travel, you get that is, especially from being up, in the Northeast and being able to go, all the way far south and have those, that's a cool, I'm jealous. That's a cool high school gig.
Thank you. Yeah. So I was fortunate.
Then did you just see the yachts when you were in the Bahamas? Did you just see them or did you meet a yachty or how did that work out?
Yeah, we were doing a lot of work around Bimini. And I was just asking the captain and crew about different, opportunities to work on board full time. And they were telling me about the research side of the world. And then I think yachting came up because I also had hospitality experience. I'd always worked 2 jobs in high school. So the aquarium being one. And then I worked at Legal Seafoods, ironically, but in the hospitality and restaurant industry. So they're if you have both and you're passionate about both, yachting would be a great intersection, which is why I checked it out.
So then you packed your bags, you moved down to South Florida, which is a good idea. There's yachts in the Northeast, but not nearly as many as down here in South Florida. Yeah. So, and I get a lot of questions, and you probably do a lot of times, is how do I get started in the industry? So how did you do it? You packed your bags, you moved down here. What did you walk the dogs? Did you put your application in everywhere? How did you come about your first job?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I have people reach out to me all the time being how do you get into this industry? Mm-hmm. It's so elusive. And I'm it's changed a lot, honestly. I did this back in 2016. So it's a little bit different now, but honestly, I went immediately and did my STCW, which at the time was a lot of money to spend on something that wasn't a sure opportunity, right? I was oh my God, I at 20 whatever years old, I'm going to be dropping $1,500, I think it was, on the STCW. Mm-hmm. Is this thing real? What does this mean? I had no idea about anything. I was just told, go to Lauderdale, take this expensive course, and then get on a boat, and your life will be changed. So
I love that.
Yeah, it was nuts. I just took a leap of faith. But through my SCCW, I gained a lot of contacts, a lot of the students as well as the teachers kind of helped me introduce me to, other people in the industry. And then I met a couple crew agents as well. So I was fortunate enough that I think a week after my class concluded, I got my first job. But it was really through networking during the SCCW and then contacting crew agents. Daywork 123 is a fantastic site too if you're looking for that kind of opportunity. But there's a lot of different ways that you can approach the industry, right? Some people join looking to be on smaller boats or large programs or freelance versus full time, and it really depends on what you want and if you know what you want too, because that's not always clear.
Yeah, no, and that's some really good advice. And I think maintaining your persistence, thinking that you're just going to pack your bags, come down here, and then just when you arrive, there's going to be, a job on the other end of it. It takes some effort. I mean, networking is huge, as much as I love the crew agencies and I communicate with a lot of them. But to, I think, express how important the networking is, I've never gotten a job through a crew agent.
Really?
My jobs have always been word of mouth. And so that's why the networking part, I can't stress enough, is so huge. And going to the events and paying attention in class and making those connections. But then going back to recruiters, is the squeaky wheel gets the grease. I tell people all the time, I'm like, imagine how many applicants they get in every day. Yeah. So you're naturally going to move to the bottom of the stack. So call them up once a week and say, hey, I'm still here, just remain top of mind. So now that's some really good advice. So then so you were how old when you got started then, when you got your first gig?
21 or 22, I think.
Okay. And so then how long were you on board?
My first job was a month long. So I did a gig in the Bahamas for a month there. And then I was in yachting full time for about 3 years. Traveling around before I kind of did more freelance stuff. Okay.
And then when did Below Deck happen?
Below Deck,
how did that come to fruition?
Yeah, I know. Great question. So Below Deck happened in 2021, I believe. So I was actually working in New York. Well, this was remote during COVID. And I get a mysterious phone call being like, hey, we're interviewing for this new show about the yachting industry. It's focused on the adventure side of it and more about exploring what the different places have to offer. Would you be interested? No network name, no allusion to that it might be on Below Deck, anything like that. And I was like, am I being pranked? This is a random WhatsApp call. I haven't used WhatsApp in a long time. So I went through one round of interviews with them. And then on the second one, it was revealed that it was filming for a new spinoff of Below Deck Adventure.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah. So how did they find you? How did these people just call you up?
I mean, it's crazy. Not to scare everyone, but I really do think Hollywood's always watching, and the reality TV world is always watching us. And if you've been in the industry for long enough, I'm sure you kind of come across people that have either been on Below Deck or have been approached by Below Deck. And yeah, I mean, especially if you're kind of prominent on social media, they tend to kind of reach out.
They're going to find you. Yeah, they're going to reach out. You. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
So you did one season.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how'd it go?
It was weird. I never. Yeah, it was something that I never really thought I wanted to do. Being on TV was nothing that I ever dreamed about. I'm kind of a shy person, but I loved it for so many reasons. It was really challenging. Anyone that's done a full charter season knows how exhausting that can be. Mm-hmm. So that was really hard, on top of the fact that you kind of have two bosses almost, because you have or three, really. You have your captain, the guests, mm-hmm. and then production, right? And as much as you're not supposed to think that they're there, you know that they're there, right? If anyone's ever been videoed on their iPhone before, you act different when you're in front of the camera, you freeze up, and it's uncomfortable. So it took a lot mentally and physically to kind of go through it, but I absolutely loved that challenge. It was something I probably will never experience again in my life, that level of kind of mind games almost.
Oh my God. Yeah. That I would imagine you walked away with a whole different level of mental toughness, if you want to say, and amongst a bunch of other skills. So now you said that you worked for Gary Vee too.
Yeah.
So when was that's freaking awesome, girl. That is so cool.
It's so my career's kind of random, but I did yachting for about 3 years. And then I started to see a lot of my friends in New York or the bigger cities kind of have these routine lives, right? And I was a little bit jealous of that. I was like, all right, I absolutely love yachting. I know this is my passion, but I kind of want to go be a kid in my 20s and explore what land-based life was like. So my friends are working at Vayner, two of them, and they introduced me to the company, and I interviewed, and then I got very lucky for being able to kind of get accepted there, and I worked at VaynerMedia, which is Gary Vee's like larger advertising agency, for about a year and a half, and then I transitioned into Sasha, which is their like startup kind of incubator and consulting company, because I realized that like I really loved working with the brands and like being more like in-house kind of with them. So I worked there for about one more year, and then it was cool.
Wow. So you had to have probably brought a lot away from that experience.
I knew nothing when I joined Vayner. Like,
that's awesome.
That's awesome. When they interviewed me, and I think like I was like one of those people where they were like, "All right, well, we need like a unique background. Like this girl worked on boats. Like this is so weird. Come have an entry level position, right?" They asked me the difference between organic and paid advertising. I'll never forget this. And I was sitting in my interview, and I was like, I don't know, the stern's the back of the boat. Like I had no idea. It was such like a foreign world, and like the terminology was just so different. Similar to yachting, right? Where there's that adaptation period.
Right.
All right.
Yeah.
If you don't have this like fluency. So it was a big learning curve, but I loved it. It taught me a lot about kind of like the startup side and how to market and talk about business.
Oh my God. So now you're I guess a little bit of a startup junkie, if we will. You were explaining to me that you've got, so where did this come about? Did you come from a family full of entrepreneurs, or is this something that you've just had a thing for and you've excelled at it? Like, tell me.
Yeah, I think no. So my dad, he is an astrophysicist, and he had one job his entire career. And he just, for this whole career, just worked for one company. Similar with my mom. I mean, she was a photojournalist, but neither were in the entrepreneurial space. I think I guess like passion for it started honestly when I was in high school and I was working two jobs, and I was like, I like making money, and like I like trying to figure out how much money I can make. And I like the challenge of kind of entering different verticals and like trying to see like how I can advance them or like learn, more about them, and create change if possible. So Gary really inspired me that you can do that more as like a career rather than, something that you kind of like dream about, right? Like I used to look at people that would create companies and be like, oh, that can never be something that I can do. And granted, I have very small companies now, but the challenge of it, I think, is what really attracts me to it.
Well, I mean, you're only 30, so get yourself like I'm just like, when we've gone back and forth and we've talked about everything that you've done, I'm just like, oh my God, I'm like and that's when I asked you the other day, I was like, how old are you? Because you've done so much in your 30 years, you should be so proud of. I mean, so just imagine where you will be in 10 years. Like I cannot wait to see. I mean, so Moby Media, tell me about that. Love the shirt, by the way.
Thank you. I gotta rep the merch.
Yeah.
I think before I get into Moby, for a couple, maybe not a couple years, maybe 2 years, like after leaving Gary and kind of my head was like all over the place. I didn't know what my passion was, and I struggled a little bit being very indecisive, right? I like knew that I wanted to start businesses, but I also knew I had a passion for yachting, and I was all over the place, which was like to my detriment, but it was a big learning curve because I just didn't know how to focus.
But it's okay though. See, I want to go, I'm about to be 43, and I want to go back to my 20-year-old self and to your 20-year-old self. Yeah. Because when we're in our 20s, we put so much pressure on ourselves, and I think society does too, that you got to figure out what are you going to be what are you going to be when you grow up? And I'm like, these guys got 80 more years of life. How the hell? Like they're 20 years old. You guys barely know how to tie your shoelaces at that age. and somebody's asking you what you want to be for the next 80 years.
Right.
Like that's a lot. So you put that on yourself. I did. Yeah. And then society puts that on yourself. And then you look around and then you're like, oh, well, she's getting married. She's having babies.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I'm 25. I'm 26. I'm like, so I just want to emphasize here that it's okay to not know. Yeah. You don't have you need some sort of a plan in mind, but you also need to be flexible that life's going to take you where it wants to take you. But it's okay. You have 80 more years. Like, don't put so much pressure on yourself. I did. I was so bad about it. And it sounds like you were a little bit too, and I just think that it's, for any young people listening, that it's okay for a minute. Like, if nonetheless know that you're normal, right? I think maybe looking back, do you realize that in your 20s, there's a lot of people that, no, they don't know what they want to do either.
I love that. I wish that more people, I think, gave me that advice in my 20s rather than being like, Orianna, focus. Like, what are you doing? Because it is a little bit hard, right? Like, you want to be passionate about what you do, but then you're still learning about who you are and what it is like to be an adult in the workforce and what being in different positions or careers mean. Like, even within yachting, there's a lot of different paths, right? And it's very difficult to know which one you want to do until you try a bunch of them, right? Even like working on deck versus the interior, like, how are you supposed to know that you want to be a chief stew one day or you want to be a first officer one day if you haven't tried out the different roles? It's like, to me, it seems a little bit irrational. So I love that advice. I love that you brought that up.
Oh, well, thank you. But because then you have to take the time and you actually have to go try them,
Exactly.
But, I always say, when I talk about leadership with my crew and stuff like that, I'm like, sometimes knowing what you don't want to do or knowing what you don't want to be is more meaningful and helpful than knowing what you do want to be. If you can say, I don't want to do that, I don't want to do this, or I don't want to be like that, or I don't want to lead like that, like, to me, knowing what you don't want to do, and you gotta go explore that. You gotta go see what is it you do and don't want to do.
I love that. And also, like, getting to the root of why. Like, why are you picking this career? Is it because you want to have a fancy title, or is it because you actually love what you do every day, or, because it's a challenge? Like, really sitting with yourself and understanding what's motivating you, I think, is difficult to do, but important.
That's good. That's good. Wow. That's I'm going to steal that one. Why do you want to be this? Why do you? No, that's a really good one, because, and that really takes some guts to sit with yourself and to, and to figure out, why is it I want to do this?
Yeah. And sometimes the answer is not what you think or not what you like want to accept, but it's the truth. And like, it will make you, the better version of whatever you're trying to be.
That's awesome.
Not to get too petty.
No. I love that. Because, one of the things with my podcast is I want people to hear other people's real life stories and how they've gotten there, and just the message in itself that, your 20s is tough, and, tell me, you're here with Moby Media now.
Yes.
So tell me about this.
Yeah. So Moby is kind of my version of finding out my why, really, like, not to like bring that full circle, but after Below Deck, I, realized that I loved yachting, but I also loved working in the startup space. So I came back into the industry about a year ago and was like, all right, how can I make this work? Like, I have these skills, in kind of the startup world, and I know that yachting is, my passion. And I started working with a charter company, making a lot of like walkthrough videos for them on their boats, interviewing, their brokers. And I kept getting more and more requests to, either do walkthroughs myself or like help people produce theirs. So eventually I realized, let me try to make a business out of that. And I launched Moby, which is a short form kind of focused media agency specifically for the maritime industry. So we have like two different pillars that we kind of exist within. One is, how can we make walkthroughs fun? Because as I'm sure you've seen and know, like, they're very redundant and like, it is important to show the vessel 100%. You need a video that is pretty and clean and bright and people know what they're getting into. But it's also really important to show who the broker is. Who are you working with? Who are you trusting with these large amounts of money? Like, what is their personality like? And also, like, what's the functionality of the boat? Like, we're not really in these walkthroughs talking about, okay, this has like a very big beam for, 100 footer. Like, what does that really mean? Like, show me, and show me fast, because I don't have an attention span because it's 2020.
Get to the point.
So, which is ironic because I talk all the time and I don't get to the point, but that's the goal. It's like, how can we kind of like pioneer the media side of the industry to be entertaining while also educational and fulfilling kind of these needs for brokers or builders. We also have, or I'm building out a CRM component because I think that a lot of brokers struggle to keep track of leads and don't really know, the best way of doing that. And
CRM?
Customer relationship management. So
Okay.
it's like HubSpot or Salesforce. I don't know if you're familiar with either of those.
I've heard of them, but so for those that are listening that are going, okay, CRM, I just learned what that is 2 seconds ago.
Yeah, exactly. Basically, it's a way of keeping track of all your contacts. So there's subscription services that, you can kind of funnel all your prospects into one, bucket, right? All of your current clients into a bucket, all of your past clients into a bucket. And then you can map out automations so you follow up with them and you stay in contact. So for example, on their birthdays, you can send a happy birthday email out to them. Or if you know that they booked a catamaran at BVI's, next time you get a listing for a catamaran, you can then just target that entire email list of people that are interested in catamarans. So marketing and sales, there's kind of two sides of it, right? There's the let's capture attention, let's show videos, let's be in your face. And then it's like, how do you stay top of mind? How do you not get forgotten about? How do you develop that relationship? And that's where the CRM side comes into play.
Okay. And so those are the two pillars of Moby then?
Yes. Yeah. So we're content and like lead gen.
Moby, where did Moby come from? Like,
everyone asks me that. And it's funny because like I hate branding. It's the worst thing in the world. I hate making logo design. I'm terrible at it. And the reason I'm saying that is because I'm not sure I'm going to stay with this name for like the long run. I might have it for like a year or so.
I love it.
I don't know, but everyone's like, what does it mean? What does it mean?
Because so you don't forget it. You don't forget it. Like, it's a conversation piece. Think about it this way. I mean, like Moby, what is Moby? Like you don't even have to say hi and people start a conversation because they're like, what is Moby?
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. But I mean, it's twofold. It's from, Moby Dick, right? And the concept is going after this like mysterious whale, right? And a lot of brokers refer to their big clients as whale clients. Like, I want to get the whale. And that's, what Moby is supposed to mean. It's like, we help you capture your whales. Which I'm sure if you're a client listening to this, you'll be like, I don't want to be called a whale. But like that,
so you're explaining then you've got this potential owner on board while you're doing a walkthrough and they see Moby and they're like, oh, hey, what's Moby? And you're like, the whale.
Yeah, it's a whale. Well, I know it's weird, but it's a finance term for like, big clients really. And I love
the name.
Thank you. Yeah, it took me a while. It was actually a name that was inspired. One of my friends was like, why don't you talk about whales and like capturing big clients? And I was like, all right, well, Moby. I'm from Massachusetts. The story's based up there as well. So it worked. And it's kind of techie, from the CRM side. I was like, I don't know, maybe I may spell it with an I, but instead of a Y, I decided not to, but yeah.
I like it. Okay. So you have Moby now. So how is it going? What's next for you? I mean, you said you might not keep the name Moby. So would that be a rebranding, which you said you need to do, or would that be a new company?
No. Moby's it full time. I went full time about 2 months ago. I was working behind the scenes for like probably 3 or 4 months. And then I was like, all right, doing this. Thankfully.
So you went completely on your own now.
Yeah. This is me.
Like, this is you.
This is me 24/7. Yeah. If you need any content creation or you want to get better at, retaining your clients and keeping in contact, bringing in leads, message me. I got you.
That is so cool.
Yeah. Thank you. No, it's been incredible. I have a couple amazing clients and we continue to grow, which is, blows my mind every day that like it's kind of really happening. But it's great. I have an amazing team that I work with too, and the company wouldn't be possible without all of them. It's an endeavor that is really daunting to take on. on your own. And I spent a lot of time vetting and figuring out like who I was going to bring on. And I'm really I'm so thankful for everyone that I work with too.
Wow. So you have, do you have employees or contractors or?
Yeah, I mean, the contractors,
okay. But
yeah,
still, they almost become
5.
like employees
Yes,
in a way.
yeah.
I mean, you have to take care of them, make sure they're happy, healthy, and understand the assignment. And yeah.
And training's a big thing for the industry, because there's nothing worse than having somebody like walk on who's supposed to be, you know, creating content for boats, like with their shoes on or touching the stainless or
oh dear, yes.
anything. And I've seen that happen before. Like when I've, you know, been on the side where like I was managing the boat and, you know, we had photographers come on. I'm like, guys, you're bumping everything. You're scratching stuff. Like you're dropping all your gear on like the teak. Like there's just things about the industry that you need to know before you come on board, no matter like what capacity you're in, right? If it's
and you sat on the bed, how dare you sit on the bed?
Exactly.
You just did what?
Exactly. Like I'm like, we're not sitting. The furniture is not for sitting; it's for looking at. Like we don't sit on the furniture. We organize all of our stuff really nicely, like in the crew area after we get permission. Like there's
and do not touch the handrail going down the stairs. I don't care if you fall, just do not touch the stainless.
Literally, basically float in midair and don't touch or breathe on anything, but still do your job.
That's awesome. Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. So what's next for you then?
I mean, I'm going to really focus on Moby for probably the next couple of years, you know, full time. I'm excited. Boat show season's coming up, and just continue to build out my clientele, continue to grow the company. I'm always looking for more, you know, freelancers and people who are passionate about the media side of the business, and want to get started, you know, anyone from entry level to, you know, senior experience. So yeah, I love it.
I'm glad you said that. I was actually going to ask, but then I was like, I don't know if it really fits into this conversation. But I just had a young girl reach out to me a couple days ago. I think she just finished her degree, and I don't know if it's marketing, journalism, social media, but she wants to be in the marketing, social media side of things.
Yeah.
And she was like, do you know anybody? And I was like, actually, I do know somebody.
Like,
so funny enough, I do. So yeah, this has been a really cool conversation. I just, you know, I like to share people's stories so that when folks are listening, they can kind of hear like, yeah, I've been there, or yeah, I am there, or maybe, you know, it's so inspirational to see you're 30 years old and you're jamming out, but you put the work in. I mean, you work your tail off. Yeah. You know, and really, I think what really resonates hugely with me that you said, and this is good for me, is why. Mm-hmm. Why are you doing this? Why do you want to do this? You know, and kudos to you for figuring it out by the time you're 30, because I think it took me to maybe 35, 36. So
I don't know if I figured it out, but I'm trying.
Well, and your why may change, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, and or what you want to do may change, or Moby Media in 2 years might be something completely different because you met somebody or you stumbled across an opportunity, you know? Right. So and what I like is you have your eyes wide open. You're ready. You're looking, you're watching. Girl, you're killing it. At 30, I'm just like so excited for you, and I'm so proud of you. Like, this is awesome.
No, I really appreciate that. And I'm so glad that we connected. I think it was a year or two ago now that we first met. And, you know, it's been really inspiring to kind of follow your journey as well. And I feel like you lift everyone up in the industry so much. So I appreciate it. And I appreciate you taking the time to, you know, do everything that you are doing and share kind of your knowledge and your perspective and what you think, you know, the industry needs to understand, really. And we were talking about vulnerability before as well. Like it takes a lot to do that. So I admire that a lot.
No, it really, really does. And so, well, yeah. And go back to that, I guess. So talking about the vulnerability, you know, and that was one of the things that I read is that, you know, how you have to be vulnerable. So that's the way that I lead. I am vulnerable. I am authentic. I am who I am. And I think it's why, you know, it has allowed me to do well. So tell me you know, you mentioned that you have to be vulnerable. Yeah. To get to where you are, to do the things that you've done? Expand a little bit on that for us.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people kind of misunderstand vulnerability and they associate it with like weakness, right? Or they think of it as like, you're not presenting like your most like powerful self. But I really think it's the opposite. I think that in order for you to try to change, if it's internally or if it's something that you're trying to do or disrupt an industry, right, with your ideas, opinions, companies, you have to be vulnerable because you have to kind of be able to push those boundaries and not be afraid of like what people are going to say. If you're going to do anything different, somebody's going to talk about you. And if they're not, you're not, being loud enough about it. And I think that that's one element of it. And the second too is like being open to feedback. And like my most, I guess, valuable like professional relationships are those that don't just pat me on the back. And they're like, Orianna, like that was probably not the best move. Or like you need to think differently about how you position yourself publicly. Or, you need to focus more in this direction or X, Y, and Z. And like, you will make mistakes in your career. And like, you just need to be open and vulnerable to accepting that some things might be like a growth opportunity and it might not always be the right move. But that's okay because no one's going to get it all right. And like, if you do, nothing would be fun. Like, it's not fun to be perfect.
No. And think about this too. Like, I love mistakes and I love screwing up because the beautiful thing about it is I learn. And I love to learn. And you don't learn, you don't grow, you don't get better by doing things right.
Right.
And you don't learn or grow by surrounding yourself with people that are going to agree with you all of the time.
Yeah.
As frustrating as it may be, going back to you saying, that you've got people in your corner that say, no, that maybe you should rethink this or you shouldn't do that. Or why did you do this? Or why did you do that? It feels uncomfortable at the time.
Right. It's awkward.
Yeah.
You're like getting reprimanded and you're like, this is so embarrassing. Like you're going to be embarrassed a lot in your career if you're like, trying to grow. So,
but it takes, I'm really glad you brought this up because vulnerability is so important on so many different levels. One, it humanizes you and makes you more approachable and makes you, easier for people to talk to and to want to talk to and to confide in, and I find that with my crew is I am who I am. Here it is. If I'm mad, sad, happy, whatever is going on, this is me. I mean, yes, my job is to lead and to be the captain and to keep, the boat afloat, but I also am human too. And I find that fosters the same thing in return. So when they're having trouble with a boyfriend or a girlfriend or mom or dad, or they're just upset or, they let it out and, and it's provided for such a really good space. But, in terms of you being vulnerable to grow in business and your startups and that kind of thing, I can't express and agree with you, how important that is. It's uncomfortable as hell. It's so uncomfortable.
It really is. And like, to your point too, like within yachting, when you're working and living on board and trying to find the line between like being vulnerable, but also like, you do have to keep that level of professionalism, but then it's your entire world. And it's like an impossible balance. Like it's really hard. So yeah, it's a lot.
No, that is, you're right. Because it's like, you can't really hide anything when you're living on board, and it's like, and I'm sitting here going, like you're saying, trying to maintain that professional balance of, okay, I'm the captain, I'm the boss, but then I'm like, okay, I'm still human and I still want to develop a relationship with my crew, but I'm still like, it's dance all of the time.
Yeah. And it differs too, like who you're with and what the crew dynamics are. And it's impossible. Like it makes sense as a reality show on us. I think there needs like, psychological studies on what it's like to live on board because it's hard. It's not easy.
It is very hard.
Life is hard. Life is even harder on board. Like,
oh, it is. I know. Well, and it's different. You know, everybody else in the world clocks out at 5 p.m. and they go home and they can get away from everybody. Here, there's a good chance that you're sharing a room with that person, and it's not a big room. It's like a box, you know? But yeah, no, being vulnerable and and accepting other people's criticisms and opening yourself up to start something new. Jumping into Moby Media, knowing that from the onset, knowing that you're going to mess up, knowing that you're going to make mistakes, but being okay. And I've tried to, I call it flipping the script, where I try to flip it around and I say, okay, I made a mistake, but that's fantastic because now I get to learn something, or take in a negative and say, oh, this is kind of negative. Well, how can I flip this around and make it a positive? It really is, I think, a mindset.
Yeah. No,
of being able to do that.
I agree. And something that we do too is like, we check in with our clients, right? And we say, hey guys, we're 2 months into the business. Like, what can we improve on? Like, what are you happy with? What are you not happy with? I actually send out an automated email every month like that. Like, it's like a survey for them, right? And it's anonymous. Like, I'm not going to know what client submitted what feedback. And similarly, I do that internally as well. So like everyone that kind of I'm managing, I say, do you have any feedback? Like, how can we keep growing? Because it's very hard to know, like you're making decisions thinking they're the right ones. And if no one's telling you their perspective of them, you don't necessarily ever know if they are correct or not. So yeah, it's super important.
And then to be able to, going back to that vulnerability, to be able to know that when you do get that feedback, it's not a personal attack, and really where you want to get. And as much as sometimes in the moment I don't love it, but when I've got crew members that will push back, especially my engineer, he'll push back and he'll tell me if he thinks something's a dumb idea. Sometimes I'm like, okay, bud, you could soften the blow a little bit, but I don't want a yes person.
Different.
Yeah. Or my chief officer will say, no, I don't want to use that product. I'd rather do it like this, or, I don't want yes people. I want people that are gonna push back, for lack of a better term, and say what they think. You don't want yes men all the time. If you have yes men all the time, or you have people telling you, yeah, Orianna, I'm Moby's great. I love everything that it's doing. Well, and then one day they're gone. You're like, wait a minute, why didn't you ever tell me you thought this, that, or the other? So having that open that rapport, and it all goes back to communication, right?
Yeah, no, it really does. And I think there's a parallel between when you have a new crew that joins together and like when you're starting a new company, it's sort of similar where you're like building out this process and you're building out relationships and dynamics and ways of delivering like an end result, right? And like in the startup world, you launch in like a beta version first. And it's basically where you're showing the world, hey, this is my concept, but we know there's a bunch of stuff that we got to fix. Like, it's going to get better. If you look at any Fortune 500 company or public company, they've iterated, right? Logo iteration is something that people love looking at online, where it's like you look at, McDonald's or Coca-Cola or any Nike, like they've all started somewhere and they're somewhere totally different today. And I think that a lot of people don't realize that. They don't think about that because they think like a finished product is what you need to be public about when you first start. Like, I'm proud of the work that we do. Do I think it's going to get better in 5 years? It better. Otherwise, like, we're doing something wrong, right? Like, similarly with a new crew, when you have a new crew member joining, the whole dynamic shifts. And you have to kind of start a lot of the time from ground zero and building up like that company, right? To keep that parallel in a new way. And it's difficult, I'm sure. And yeah.
Oh my God. Well, I can't wait to see where you are in 5 years. I mean, I can't wait to see where you are in 6 months from now. It's been so cool since we met and following you along and watching your journey. And girl, I just got to say, you're a powerhouse. I'm so proud of what you've been able to accomplish in your 30 years. I can't imagine where you'll be in another 30 years. It's going to be absolutely amazing. Thank you for just sharing, about being vulnerable and again, what really sticks with me is why. That's, I think that's the best.
I appreciate it. And
thanks for joining.
Absolutely. I'm always here. Love to chat. Love to share my experiences. Any crew looking to get out of the industry and are interested in kind of the media and tech side, reach out. I'm love to talk and just say hi and introduce ourselves. So don't be shy.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Orianna Schneps, guys, such a powerhouse of a woman. So thanks for listening.
Thank you. Thank you all for tuning in. I appreciate it.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.